And of course, Mama V is right. It's the first Monday of the year, the first working day of the year, first day back at work for most of us. And as always, I have a story for you. Ron walked home from work every day. It was a 10-minute walk, but he made it last an hour by going through Charlotte's Park, where he would sit on a bench by the pond for 45 minutes, feeding the ducks and enjoying the peace and quiet. This tranquil hour was Ron's favorite time of the day for two reasons. First, he really loved wildlife. Something about the ducks, the squirrels, and the birds he shared the green space with just spoke to his spirit, And second, it delayed his return home to his wife Phyllis, who was louder than a convoy of ambulances and could certainly win the Nobel Peace Prize for starting a war. Now, when the City Council put up a sign informing residents that the park was to be shut down to make way for a new dual carriageway linking the city centre to the motorway, Ron was livid. How could they take away his hour of tranquility? How could they make him go home early? He was going to have to do something about it. So the next day, on his lunch break, he marched into his local authorities' offices and demanded to speak to someone high up. Now, after waiting for almost an hour, he met some county council bigwig who told Ron the deal was already done, with words like, "Oh, we consulted widely about this decision, and there are still enough parks in the city to meet our green space quota." The county hall mandarin dismissed Ron's concerns, but Ron would not take it lying down. He dug up records of all the species of birds, squirrels, badgers, moles, even ants that lived in the park. He collected documents on the fish in the pond, the ducks, the geese, the trees, and the flowers in his beloved park. He then added an eloquent letter about how all the wildlife would be displaced and endangered if the authorities didn't find a way to construct the highway around the park instead of through it. He submitted copies of his letter and attached wildlife reports to all departments of the county council, from highways to environmental protection. No doubt they would change their minds once they saw the evidence he had painstakingly gathered. Weeks went by and Ron got no response. He wrote to them again. This time he hand-delivered them. Still no response. So Ron decided to send one letter a day. He copied in every newspaper editor, as well as every news anchor, show host, and reporter he could identify at every radio and TV station in the city. Every day for a month, Ron sent his letters. He would then follow up with phone calls to find out if his letter had been received and when action would be taken on it. Eventually, a journalist at the Evening Standard newspaper made a phone call to the county council to inquire about the claims made in Ron's daily letters. And this sparked a chain reaction. First, the council wrote to Ron and invited him to a meeting. They then issued a public statement saying environmental protection would do a risk assessment to determine the impact of the construction on the wildlife. 2 weeks later, the council announced that they had adjusted their construction plans and the park would be saved. Finally, Ron's voice had been heard. Now, why am I telling you this story of some middle-aged resident of the East Midlands? Well, it's just to illustrate the power of one man's voice. One thing 2020 has taught us is that people do take the power of their vote very seriously. They wait quietly for 4 years to tell their government what they think of them. And when they do so, they want their voice to be heard. They want their vote to be counted. After all, they've waited 4 years to use it. The thing is, elections are not the only times when you have a voice. You don't only get to wield power once every 4 years as part of some collective group of 13 million voters or so. No. You have a voice every day of every week of every month of every year between this past election and the next. Also, you really don't need to be part of a demonstrating mob to have your voice heard. One man can change things just by using their voice loud enough and long enough. So what is bothering you, my dear friend? Is it the lack of street lights in your area? Is it the poor roads, the bad service from that restaurant you went to? Is it the ECG? Is it the decisions of your MPs that are being made on your behalf? It doesn't matter what it is. This year, I want you to shout about it over and over again until it is sorted. Yes, you're only one person And no, you're not a celebrity with 1 million followers who would happily retweet your farts if you had the bad sense to share them. But you don't need any of that to make a difference. Remember Ron? He wrote 1 letter a day until he was heard. So keep tweeting your thoughts daily. It's not enough to tweet once about your grievance. Keep hashing that tag until everyone gets in on it. Tweet every day until the revolution comes. And if you are not on Twitter, write. Make phone calls. Go to the offices of the people that you need to have your voice heard and wait to see them. Whether it's a politician or a church leader or a police commander, you alone and your persistent voice can turn every situation around. Here at Joy, on Joy News, we believe in starting every new year with a conviction to do at least one thing right. But to do it well, of course, and do it consistently until we see its positive impact on our lives. So why don't we all make 2021 the year of the voice? Let's think about that. My name is Kujo Yankson, and it takes only one match to light 1,000 candles. Good morning, Ghana.
Hello, good morning and welcome to the AM News with me, Mapito CBD. Now, legal practitioners are urging the public to have confidence in the Supreme Court to provide justice in the latest petition filed before it by NDC's presidential candidate John Mahama. Head of Law Plus, Dennis Ajay-Doma, and Gimpa Law lecturer Justice Shrimshai Sai believe the laws of the land will be upheld to ensure a fair hearing for both sides and subsequently an objective verdict by the judges. They were reacting to the widespread perception in the public domain that justices of the Supreme Court may be biased towards the incumbent following his appointment of a majority of the judges in the apex courts. But lawyer Dennis Ajay-Doma explains why Ghanaians should have an open mind.
But some of us who work with the system trust the system that at the end of the day, justice will be delivered. People may not like it, but at the end of the day, we think that the court will look at the circumstance of it and make a determination as to who has right. And remember that in terms of court, we are there to look at the evidence, evaluate the evidence, and make a determination. And people should bear in mind that even if you might have certain challenges in your constituency, we are looking at the presidential election. So you might not have, certain constituencies went well, certain constituencies. So there's already prejudice among other people. Right. But we believe that in our democratic dispensation, we need to trust the system. After all, the petitioner was the beneficiary of the system in terms of the court making a determination in 2012. So if he strongly puts his case across, what will change in 2020? So I understand where people are coming from, but many a time, most of the people who are very hardliners, if you decide to look at their idiosyncrasies, it's because they belong to a political party. But if at the end of the day, that's not strange, because in court, people lose, people win. People sometimes do not get anything that they want.
Do you mean you understand when some people say this particular government has packed the courts and that it has appointed the majority of the judges, and therefore they take it that there is no chance, opportunity for the NDC?
I disagree with those who make that submission, because the history of the court has taught, and I give a practical example. In 2012, when they went for the election petition, Justice Bafuboni was appointed by the MPP government. Justice Bafuboni looked at the facts and the evidence and determined against Nana Akufo-Addo. At the end of the day, Justice Adinira, who was appointed by Akufo, looked at the facts and the evidence and determined it against Nana Akufo-Addo. So at the end of the day, it will depend on the issues. The history of this court, of the Supreme Court, has not taught us that when it comes to election matters, judges are zombies, and for that matter, they will look at who appointed them to make a determination when, at the end of the day, in their conscience and in terms of what they believe, might not be in line with justice. So I disagree with anybody who thinks that the court will be biased.
Be that as it may, Justice Shrimshai is urging the courts to open up the processes to beef up trust. He also spoke on the law.
I definitely am a lawyer and I believe in the system.
Right.
But I understand the concern that people are also raising, being a legal, a student of the law and judicial policy. You cannot also dismiss the argument that, the claim that people are making. And I believe the judges understand that people will always doubt the outcome of their work, and they are ready for whatever will happen. what we need to do is that is why there's a need for transparency in the process, and that is why we are all calling for, because when you see what happened in court, even before the case is closed, you as an individual, if you're honest with yourself, you should be able to come to a certain decision, and you will not be, so transparency is the solution to some of these things, and not to try to dismiss the concern that people are raising. You can always dismiss it by being more transparent and be more educative. I mean, like some of the things that we are doing here, we are throwing lights, for example, the issue of extension. I mean, someone may think that once the rule says 10 days, if you come on the 11th day, you should be dismissed. But I have explained that there may be genuine cases where the court will grant. With this understanding, someone will not say the court is being biased by giving someone an extension of one more day. So these are some of the things that we need to do to whittle down the suspicion that people have of the courts.
Now, Interim Minister Ambrose Derry says he's unaware of any deductions in salaries of personnel of the Ghana Police Service. He is, however, aware of what he describes as welfare issues regarding the pay structure and which have been resolved. Some unspecified amount of monies were paid to the personnel as election duty allowance, but there have been recent reports of grumbling among police personnel who have complained about some deduction from their monthly salaries after the elections. Ambrose Derry told Upper West Region's correspondent Rafiq Salam if those anomalies are brought to their attention, they will be swiftly dealt with.
Personnel of the Ghana Police Service in the run-up to the 2020 general election were paid some unspecified amount of monies as election duty allowances. The payment of these monies to the police personnel raised some red herrings among the leadership of some political parties, including NDC flag bearer John Dramani Mahama, who opined that the officers were bribed to vote for the governing New Patriotic Party (NPP). Inspector General of the Ghana Police Service, James Opombuanu, at a press conference, debunked the assertion made by the NDC flag bearer, describing it as palpable falsehood and calculated to denigrate the institution of the police service. He explained that the monies given to the officers were their election duty allowances, which hitherto were paid after the officers had completed their election assignments, sometimes affecting their morale in the performance of the special national duty. The election is now over. However, there is grumbling from some personnel of the Ghana Police Service about some strange and abnormal deductions they are seeing on their monthly pay slips.
I'm not aware of any deductions from their salaries. What I do know is that as an ongoing matter in matters of welfare, where issues arise, where they think that there are maybe discrepancies in pay structure, those matters are resolved. And I do know that matters were raised and resolved, and I'm not aware of any deductions. If they are brought to our attention, we would make sure that the police deal with them and address the issues as much as possible, except to say that any payments that were made to anybody were made legitimately and were not meant to, as it were, influence anybody or any way, as it were, compromise the professionalism of anybody.
Meanwhile, concerns about armed robberies have surged in regions up north. The Interim Minister, who has been addressing the issue, says the trend will be properly analysed to deal with it holistically.
Speaking exclusively to Joy News on a wide range of issues, the Interior Minister also spoke about some recent armed robbery cases in the Upper West region and pledged to tackle them head on.
My understanding is that there have been some armed robberies that have occurred. That is when? West area. Involved the chief executive and others. And I can assure you that we need to do an assessment of the situation to see what is bringing what, whether it's a blip that we can check, and if it's a deterioration, that we do make sure that we do everything that's possible to send us back to the situation that motivated the one to praise the security situation. I am sorry about any incidents that might have been gone against the situation that has existed, but we're going to make sure that it is rectified.
Having had his mandate for another 4-year stint as the legislature renewed, Ambrose Derry is grateful to the people of the Dundrum constituency.
I want to take this opportunity to thank the voters for the confidence that have imposed in me. I am going to go and, under the leadership of His Excellency the President, pursue the developmental agenda of the President, which has been in the past 4 years.
3 days to raise 3,200 CDs, or miss out on a lifetime opportunity to study at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. That is the story of 21-year-old Emmanuel Kumson. Currently living with a single mother in the western regional town of Apoa, has already spent 2 years waiting to enter university because of financial difficulties. Western regional correspondent Untitled Chapter has his story.
Emmanuel Kumson, 21 years, has always dreamt of being an engineer. Even as a child, his love for science and gadgets would drive him to wear lab coats, pretending to be a scientist whilst playing with friends. In his spare time, even as a JHS student, he would gather children in his neighborhood and teach them science.
I realized that in my community, the children had problems in science and mathematics, and I would not describe myself as an exceptional student. I'm just a normal student who is ready to fight challenges and be better the next time around. So I took the challenge upon myself to be able to equip them, solve their problems in mathematics and science. I organized free classes for them with the help of my teachers at Parliamentary school, and it was very, very inspiring. They were able to solve their problems and then come out very bright in their subject areas.
Emmanuel Kumson had just started saving up to go to university. He had spent 2 years staying home while his mates moved on to tertiary after SHS because his mother could not afford his fees. He was working as a people teacher. Then COVID-19 struck.
Since the closure of the schools, we have not been receiving salaries, and it was very challenging for us. The school was not paying us because the management said they had financial problems, which would be very difficult for them to be able to pay the teachers.
Emmanuel has 3 days to see a miracle and raise 3,200 cedis, or watch his lifelong ambition of becoming an engineer fall on rocks.
I was someone who fights challenges and also come back stronger. I will plead on Ghanaians to assist me become an engineer so that I could be able to help in lifting the next generation, because I believe in the saying that we rise by lifting others, and if someone is able to lift me up, I would also continue to lift the next generation up.
In Athalia Kwanzaa, Joy News, Aponwa.
Managers of private and public orphanages have been sharing chilling accounts on how support from Love FM Insurer Abodo and an annual event organized by the Multimedia Kumase has impacted on lives of inmates and caretakers. They say cash donations, clothes and food items they receive at the annual program as part of the Multimedia Group's corporate social responsibility to the needy has helped save many inmates from starving. The cash-strapped Home Safe cash and food items received from the company has for several years become the main source of funding for second cycle and tertiary education of inmates. The managers made these observations as 27 orphanage homes received several bales of clothes, food items and cash amount. Love FM's Mona Lisa Frimpong has more.
It was all joy as inmates from 27 orphanages gathered at the annual Love and Ishra Abodo event. Inmates participated in dancing and poetry recital competitions as they ate and made merry. Presence of COVID-19 means each home was allowed to bring only representatives amidst strict adherence of all health and safety protocols. The annual event cash donations increased with over 35% from previous year's events. Beneficiaries received between 6,000 and 12,000 Ghana cedis cash in addition to clothes and food items. For managers of these homes, support from Love and Insura Abodo means a lot.
Formally, we don't have toilets. Through Insura Abodo, we have 4-seater toilet now, and we don't have tap. I mean the water. Through Insura Abodo, we have get our pipe there as it, and formally we don't have even office as a reception. Through Insura Abodo, we have built our temporary office container. Formally we have problem at our, what do you call it, our terminal there or the home there. Whenever there's a rain, you see the place is not good. Through Insura Abodo, we have cement all the place. So I can say Insura Abodo have helped us a lot.
It has helped us through education sector, how to feed the children, and so on and so forth, clothing and shelter,
These that are given to us are used profitably in paying their school fees, buying a dress for them, taking their health care, taking care of their health needs.
Programs Director of Insura FM, Benjamin Fifi Okran, is happy about the support Multimedia Kumasi received from the public.
We thank all the donors who help us within Ghana and also those who brought items from the diaspora. We thank them and we say, may God richly bless all of them.
He has been explaining the rationale behind the event.
Today's event is the 15th edition of what we say we give to society. This event is dubbed Insura Abodo and it's the 15th edition. What we do is that as an organization, as a media house, every year we give to society. And we look at the people who are vulnerable in society and help them as part of our social responsibility.
Meanwhile, Deputy Head of Events and Promotions at Multimedia Kumasi, Eric Inkum, described this year's event as success despite COVID-19.
Last year we had huge number of people coming here, but because of the COVID-19, in fact, we at Multimedia have taken a very big cue. And then what we wanted to do is to observe the social distancing protocol. So instead of inviting all the homes here, we asked them to bring 5 people each to observe the social distancing protocol. And it has been very successful.
Mona Lisa Frimpong reporting.
That's it for the AM News with me, Mapisa CBD. The AM show continues with Mama V and Benjamin. Stay tuned. Go for it.
One of those moments. Well, welcome to the news review segment of the show. This is where we dig into the papers. It's a lean morning, Mama V. Interesting. I mean,
I guess we're fortunate to even have some hardcore papers today because the whole of last week there weren't papers. We had to go to the online portals. But of course there were updates online, except that the news was very scanty. Wasn't much happening.
I guess they're still coming out, off the tracks when it comes to the holidays because, so it's a bit slow, but it will pick up, I'm sure, from this week.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So happy New Year if you just tune in. It's of course 2021. This is January 4th. Good for you if you're not working. You're still holidaying. Those of us working, there isn't much traffic, so it feels like a holiday, kind of. Maybe things will pick up later. Our court correspondent, Joseph Akable, will be joining us via Zoom on this review. A very important thing happening in the court today, 4th of January. He'll be giving us some updates. But we've got the Daily Graphic, the Finder, and the Daily Guide, these 3 papers, and then we'll do the rest online. So let me start off, Ben, if you don't mind.
Sure.
With the Daily Graphic newspaper. This is what's on the front page. Presidential inauguration. Akufo-Addo takes second oath Thursday. Supreme Court prepares to hear Mahama's petition. Graphic urge to maintain leadership position is also another story. And then I guess the big one from yesterday's address by the president, basic schools reopen January 15. And then still on the 2020 election petition, Chief Justice's crucial role. Paper is highlighting on that on page 13. Let's see. It's a story by Emmanuel Hodgson. It talks about the Chief Justice's crucial role in this petition. And then who becomes next speaker? Race heats up. We will try and get some names that maybe the paper is mentioning in today's edition. Let's see. There's Mr. Freddie Blaise name coming up. He's the national chairman of the NPP. There's Professor Aaron Michael Quay, the speaker in this 7th Parliament. There's Justice Jones Doche's name also coming up. Yep. He's a Supreme Court judge. And then Ghana's High Commissioner to Canada, Ni Ayikwe Otu. He's also a former Attorney General Minister of Justice. Ghana's High Commissioner to the UK, Papa Wuswankoma. His name has also come up. And the paper says that another source would not confirm or deny the names, but insisted the party was yet to take a firm decision on that. From the camp of the NDC, a source confirmed to the Daily Graphic that the party would also propose a candidate for the position of Speaker. It mentioned some of the names that had come up strongly as the outgoing 2nd Deputy Speaker, Alban Bagbin, who is also the current Member of Parliament for Nadoli Kalio, and then a former Speaker, Edward Doa-Jaho, and a former Deputy Chief of Staff, Dr. Valerie Sawyer. Very interesting names. The others, the source said, were 2 retired justices of the Supreme Court, Justices William Atuguba and Ophelia Ejebia Adinyira, and the General Secretary of the NDC, Johnson Asiedu Nketiah. Wow. Well, lots of names coming up.
Yeah. Interesting mix there.
Yeah,
and I'm just, looking forward to what exactly is going to happen, especially with the NDC also putting forward, names at least for the speakership position. One thing is clear, working together this time is going to be more than we've seen in the 4th Republic, and so it remains to be seen. But of course, there's that issue that still hangs, which could determine which party even might have the opportunity of selecting, the Speaker of Parliament. And it has to do, and not just the Speaker of Parliament, the leadership of the committees of the House and all of that. And it has to do with the issue we're looking at today, the Hohoi case. Today's the 4th.
Today's the 4th, yes.
That issue is going to be addressed. You remember what Godfred Dame pleaded for. And so I'm just waiting. I've told you already, testing the law is something that excites me. So I'm waiting to see what happens today.
All right, let's look at the back page. It's got some sports. It says, Liberty deepen Legon City's woes. And then ruthless hearts cuts became to size. I like it when they call hearts ruthless. Because originally that's what we are.
What you that's all home no pay. But the coach was not happy with the lads' performance. He said while it was a clean sweep, they did not do what he had wanted them to do on the pitch. So
I wouldn't take that coming from you.
No, but that's what your coach said.
I'm reading the headline. That's not what it says.
The secretary
that's not what it says. It says ruthless hearts cuts became to size.
Right.
Let's welcome Joseph Akable. I should have given you this headline to read, Akable. The story on hats. Where's his face?
Okay, there he is.
We hear how Hearts actually managed to win that particular match. We will not be surprised if there's news of some possible bribing of officials among other things.
Wow, look, baseless allegations. But this is not even new.
Be unraveled eventually.
Shall I show you what the back page says? Do you want to read it?
No, I've heard the story already.
But Akable, listen, let's briefly talk about the names coming up in terms of the speaker. Have you heard any names not mentioned in this paper on the side of the NDC and the NPP? And who do you think will be a perfect speaker for this 8th Parliament?
I think generally those are the names that have come up, and they are quite interesting. It's similar to the 2004 situation where the NDC and MPP both had to put up candidates because the MPP decided not to return Peter Lajete due to disagreements with the presidency. The NDC then decided that they were going to nominate Peter Lajete as Speaker of Parliament, while the MPP came in with Sechina Hughes. So eventually it had to go for a vote. Then due to that disagreement, the MPP ended up having their preferred candidates as the Speaker, Deputy Speaker, First Deputy and Second Deputy Speaker as well. And so whenever you have such disagreement, it becomes tight and one party ends up losing entirely. I think ideally, with how Parliament is, if not for the close nature, we would have preferred someone that you may want to call non-partisan to handle the affairs. But due to the close nature of this particular Parliament, I get a sense that the executive would obviously want to have someone who could play games and be able to get the other sides on board. You know, those things, it's very difficult for non-politicians to obtain those skills and be able to get people to agree to certain issues in a manner that sometimes goes against the party lines and stuff like that. And so that is what makes it quite interesting to look out for. My preference would obviously have been for a non-politician to be a main Speaker of Parliament, and not necessarily from the Supreme Court, but I mean, the MPs will decide. I don't know whether I've answered your question.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know, when you say that, there are names coming in terms of high commissioners. So there's Ayikwe Otu, for instance, there's Papa Uswankuma. Are those the ones that you're looking at probably when you say not necessarily from the Supreme Court, but not necessarily active political animals, if you like?
Papa Uswankuma is obviously someone who will have respect from both sides of the aisle. And so he has been in Parliament, he's risen through the ranks, and so he'll be an important appointee if he gets the nod. I'm not too sure whether he will. And so, yes, I would prefer someone of that caliber. I'm not too sure about Ayiko too because of his lack of experience in the House. I'm not too sure of how he would be able to work with both sides of the House at that level. So that would make it tough. I am all against anyone moving from the Supreme Court to the legislature. I don't think that is a good practice that we ought to encourage. I mean, they should stay on the Supreme Court and do their work and allow retired MPs preferably to come in to handle this particular job, or maybe current MPs.
Interesting.
Well, Akable, so something else I would like to run by you. Today is D-Day, and you've been talking about the Hohoi situation. What are the latest? What have you been hearing that you can share with us on that matter?
And so you recall the court on December 30 had said that the lawyers on both sides filed their written agreements, and lawyer Chikata was asked to file by 31st December at 12 noon, with the AG's office exercising the right to respond by a close of working day. What has actually happened since then is that Mr. Chikata failed to file by 12 noon. He actually filed his arguments on December 31 at 2:30 p.m. And so it was just 30 minutes to the close of work at the filing office. So the Attorney General's office could not be served in time and they couldn't even respond. And so we understand that this morning the AG's office will first draw the court's attention to the fact that Mr. Chikata has failed to file in time as was ordered by the courts. And so because of that, the AG's office couldn't file any arguments. We understand that the AG's office will nonetheless say that the court should proceed to hear the matter based on the merits and have the legal arguments take place. And the AG will be urging the court to restrain the High Court from proceeding to hear any matter relating to the Hohoi constituency. And the latest is that in that regard is also that the 10-day injunction has actually elapsed. And so there's currently no injunction in force in terms of the gazetting of John Peter Mewu as MP-elect for Hohoi constituency. And so it will be quite an interesting day at the Supreme Court. And the expectation also is that the apex court will be able to deliver judgment if it is minded to do so today, in order to clear the way, if you can put it that way, or give further directions that may stall the process. And so this is very important as it affects the composition of Parliament in some 48 hours to come.
So before we check out the other papers, very important point you made there. The injunction has technically elapsed, and so if today there is no further process, that legally speaking, it means things are going to be hanging, especially as we gear up for the 7th, where indeed the 8th Parliament will be sworn in. So very interesting times indeed that we have on our our hands there. Mamavi, maybe you'd like to...
Just to add that yesterday there were pictures of Mr. Amewu registering, there's a registration exercise going on with members of parliament who will be coming in the 8th Parliament. There were pictures of him, filling his documents.
He's confident.
And people were asking about the injunction and whether or not
it's at the labs. It's at labs on Saturday.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's do Daily Guide.
I think I'll commence with the Finder newspaper. Okay. And it says Dr. Awal, the Business Development Minister, gifts Tamale Nursing and Midwifery Training College 50 kilovolt standby generator. That's on page 12. Then there's police outline tight security measures for inauguration. That's on page 5 of the paper. Schools reopen in full from January the 15th. That's on page 2. And I'll just take snippets of that. I think the way the Finder newspaper usually captures these is very apt. It's point by point. And so beginning from the 15th of January, children in the basic schools, I'm talking about kindergarten, primary and junior high, in both private and public schools, will be back in school. SHS 2 and 3 reopen on January 18. SHS 1, that will be on March the 10th. But note, if you missed it yesterday, no more double track for SHS 1 and 3. That's the new situation, but double track will continue for SHS 2. And, in yesterday's address, the president went on to talk about some lessons drawn from the reopening of schools and the hygiene protocols and all of that. I was mentioning earlier that Kenya, the students also go back to school today, and we can see what we can learn from them ahead of our own reopening. Our cases are still out there, so let's not take them for granted. Now, there's the bit about 20 NDC MPs facing charges over the march to the EC's headquarters. That's on page 4. I'll dig a bit into that as well. And the story actually says 20 National Democratic Congress members of Parliament have been charged with unlawful assembly following their march to the Electoral Commission's head office in Accra on Tuesday, December 22, 2020. Now, in addition to the MPs, the NDC's Deputy General Secretary, Peter Boamo Otokuno, was also charged with the same offense. They are said to have, failed to notify the police before their march. The statement of offense said they unlawfully assembled and conducted themselves, quote, in a manner likely to cause persons in the neighborhood reasonable fear where a breach of the peace is likely to be occasioned, unquote. And those charged, Haruna Idrisu, Mohammed Mubarak Muntaka, Sam George, John Abdullah Jinapor, Roxanne Dafiamepo, Ras Mubarak, Mutawakilu Adam, Ebenezer Oklete, Tel Abi, Dr. Kwabena Donko, and ABA Fusaina. There are others, but those are some of the names right there. No ill motive in, sorry about that, no ill motive in transfer of judges. That's according to the Judicial Service. That's a story as well on page 4. Interesting one you should get into, because there are always, it's just like with the police reassignment, reshuffling and all of that. There's always a bit about, oh, there's something in there. Why is this person getting reshuffled and all of that? So all of that in there on page 4. You had wanted to...
Joseph, just before you leave us, the last bit on this, on the back of the NDC minority members who have been charged, do you know the manner in which this will be carried out?
And so they are to show up at the circuit court. We understand that some of them have indicated that they will not be showing up. They are drawing on what they believe to be some form of immunity, because they say they have parliament today at 10 a.m. And so if they are required to show up in the court at 9 or at 10 a.m., they cannot show up. And that is the latest that we've picked up on that particular issue. But they were served, they've been served, we understand, with the court summons prior to this particular weekend. So we are waiting to see. And again, some of them are also saying that they've not, the police prosecutors and the state prosecutors for that matter, have not written to the speaker, informing the speaker of this particular move. In times past, we've seen it, the speaker is written to and informed that this is what is happening. And so the MP should be excused or allowed to show up. It came up during the Ayaruga issue, the High Court. The speaker actually wrote to the High Court asking the High Court judge to fix hearings such that it doesn't affect the work of the MP. But the High Court judge then rejected that particular letter and said that, the court is independent and the legislature cannot determine for it how it runs in business, and no such immunity exists for an accused person. And so today will certainly be an interesting day in that the MPs may not show up, and if they are not, then the only other option, unless there's a good reason why they are not showing up, will be for the courts to, the state prosecutors to ask the courts for an arrest warrant to be issued against them. And so we don't know how all of those issues will pan out, unless maybe the prosecutors have also been informed of their inability to show up due to parliamentary business. But the charges against them, one relates to unlawful assembly and the other being a breach of the Public Order Act.
Okay, very interesting. So one eye is at the Circuit Court and the other at the Supreme Court, all happening this morning. Joseph Akable, we'll let you go for now. Thank you very much. That's our court correspondent. You've got one last paper to do.
Yes, one last paper. But, you know, interestingly, we found out at a point that even in Parliament, there could be the situation of contempt. And I'm wondering whether this action, at least from the court's end, because these are parliamentarians involved, whether it could in any way, you know, border on those lines where you're summoned to appear before a court and, you know, you fail to show up. Because in this instance, well, there are those technicalities of the Speaker of Parliament citing that we're supposed to have, you know, something in the House of Parliament. And so these people are not going to be able to make it. But like you heard Akable say, some of them are simply saying, we're not going to show up.
Well, we wait to see how things unfold this morning.
Well, so the Daily Guide, Mahama in court seeks election rerun. And then Supreme Court hears Amewe injunction case today. These are all cases we've heard. Interestingly, in the Daily Graphic, it gives a blow-by-blow account of, you know, the difference in the case, the petitions, 2012 and now.
Okay.
2012, where you would have, you know, cases of overvoting, polling stations that didn't exist per what the claims were, and where you would have the petitioners being the current president, the vice, and the chairman of the party at the time, Jake Obechebi Lamte. In this instance, it is, you know, the flag bearer of the NDC going toe-to-toe with the winner or the president-elect, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, and the EC. So some very interesting dynamics, the changes, the different scenarios. And mind you, in 2012, the MPP was calling for the entire presidential election to be overturned. In other words, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, now president, to then be declared president. That didn't happen. But in this instance, you know, John Dramani Mahama is simply saying that none of the parties got the 50% and over. And so, you know, there must be a rerun. So very, very interesting dynamics. You should check out the details from the Daily Graphic with regard to the differences, 2012 and now.
Okay. All right, let's quickly do myjawline.com. Myjawline.com, we'll probably see what's happening on the BBC real quick before we introduce our sports segment. So this is what's happening on our page this morning. Schools to reopen on January 15, says the president in that state, in that address yesterday. There's a playback if you missed it. Government reintroduces free water and electricity for Lifeline customers. That's for the next 3 months, January, February, March. Schools to resume. Okay, this was before the address. We will not honor police summons to appear in court on Monday. That's according to the minority leader. We've heard Joseph Akable give us the backstory. Bono East Regional Coordinating Council inaugurated to commence socio-economic development. FBI searches for victims of $28 million Ponzi scheme. Plenty other stories on myjoyonline.com. Ghana will plant, harvest, and build to be fruitful, says Dr. Mensah Otabil of the ICGC. Plenty stories there that you can find time and then read.
Maybe we can do the BBC briefly. There's also Trump tells Georgia official to find votes, and there's been that telephone conversation about an hour long where he was supposedly telling the person, look, find me some 11,000 plus votes. And, you know, I don't know, but Trump never ceases to surprise. There's also, after another Chelsea loss, how much pressure is Lampard under? That's a very interesting one. At a point in time, we were calling for our coach to get the axe. Now, when I say our coach, it excludes Mama V because she's now a Leeds United fan.
You know,
and your Leeds United,
just when I took my eyes off the ball, I realized Manchester United was second on it. I was like, what?
We're level on points with Liverpool, and now you're thinking, no, confess. Are you going to?
I am not. I'm not thinking anything.
Okay. And finally, on patrol night vision in DR Congo. So those are some of the stories from the BBC as well.
Okay.
Let's, see the position now and do some sports. That's up next on the AM show.
Yeah, but just before that, I think this is very interesting. South Africa targeting to vaccinate 40 million people by end of 2021.
40 million?
40 million people by end of 2021. That story is right there on the Africa page of the BBC. Okay, so this is where we have to end the review. After sports, we'll come back and deal with some very important matters with the reopening of schools. We've got some stakeholders on the show to have a conversation with. We will also be talking extensively about the NDC, the minority members of Parliament who are expected to appear before court today. You've heard some of them say that they will not honor that. We will be discussing that issue. But we've got a special package in sports today. 54 years ago in Kingston, Jamaica, the special 4x100 meters quartet comprising Bonake Mens, Ebenezer Charles Okoadi, James I. Addy, and Stanley Fabian Alute won gold for Ghana in grand style at the 1966 Commonwealth Games. The young and energetic Ghanaian athlete set a games record and denied host Jamaica of gold. Ghana's 1966 success story on the tracks cannot be overemphasized because of the giants the Golden Quartet were up against. The gallant men who ran the first and third legs, Mens and Ayadi, have sadly passed on, but Alute and Okoadi are still very much alive, residing in the United States and Ghana respectively. To finally get to tell the wonderful story, George Addy Jr. of Joy Sports caught up with Okoadi, nicknamed Daddy Long Legs, at his home in Accra at almost 80 and alone these days after the passing of his wife, Professor Irama Addy.
Welcome back on the AM show, and there's a lot to talk about when it comes to opening the doors of our educational institutions once more. We're going to be delving into that conversation, but before we do that, the president yesterday was delivering the 21st COVID-19 address. Let's catch snippets of that.
In a much better position to oversee successfully the full reopening of our schools. Our children must go to school, albeit safely. We are satisfied that in the current circumstances, the reopening of our schools is safe. So from 15th January, our children in kindergarten, primary, and junior high, in both private and public schools, will be back in school. All SHS 1 students will start classes from 10th March, with all his students embarking on a single-track academic calendar. Their seniors in SHS 2 and SHS 3 will, however, return to school from 18th January. I must stress that SHS 3 students in all schools, like SHS 1 students, will no longer run the double-track system. The expansion of infrastructure at the various senior high schools over the last 3 years has brought us to this favorable situation. However, the double-track system will still be applicable to SHS 2 students in schools that are employing it. Students in universities and other tertiary institutions are to be in school from Saturday, 9th of January. Prior to their return to school, government through the Ministry of Education and the Ghana Education Service will ensure that all institutions, public and private, are fumigated and disinfected. Schools and institutions with their own hospitals and clinics will be equipped with the necessary personal protective equipment and have isolation centers to deal with any positive cases. All other schools and institutions without their own clinics and hospitals have been mapped to health facilities. There will be, for now, no mass gatherings and no sporting activities. However, religious activities for students at school under the new protocols will be permitted. Social distancing and the wearing of face masks must become the norm in our schools. The requisite provisions have been made to ensure that students at all levels of the education ladder receive the minimum number of contact hours upon their return to school. To facilitate the safety of students, government through the Ministry of Education will provide face masks, Veronica buckets, hand sanitizers, liquid soap, rolls of tissue paper, and thermometer guns for the safe reopening of the schools. The Ministry of Information, the Ministry of Education, the Ghana Health Service, and the Ghana Education Service will, from Monday, 4th January, commence a series of sensitization campaigns to help prepare, inform, and educate guardians, students, and the public on further modalities associated with the reopenings. I want to use this address to assure all parents and guardians the government is determined to protect the lives of all students, teachers, and non-teaching staff who will be returning to school from tomorrow. It bears repeating that every one of them must adhere strictly to the protocols to protect themselves and others. Fellow Ghanaians, it has been well established that the very first cases of COVID-19 in Ghana were imported into our shores. Limiting importation of cases has thus been one of our main objectives since the outbreak of the disease in the country. We in Ghana have always been concerned about variant strains of the virus coming into the country. That is why when we opened our international airport on 1st September, we introduced one of the strictest testing regimes in the world, a two-tier testing system, which indicated that all passengers arriving at Kotoka must be in possession of a negative PCR test result upon their arrival in Ghana, a test which should have been conducted not more than 72 hours before the scheduled departure from the country of origin. In addition to this, all passengers were to be subjected to a mandatory COVID test. As of 1st January 2021, a total of 712 positive cases out of 118,278 tests conducted have been recorded among international arrivals at the Kotoka International Airport.
And so that was His Excellency the President yesterday, well, in that 21st address. I should be saying President-elect. And we're now going to zero in on, the matters that need to be looked at. And we're going to be joined by Thomas Musa, General Secretary of NAT, the Ghana National Association of Teachers. He joins us for a conversation. We also have Ayikwe Awule Adokwe, Communications Director for the concerned Teachers Association. We're also going to be joined in this segment by Alhaj Yakub Abubakar, who is with the CHAS. He is actually president of CHAS. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us for this discussion.
Thank you.
Right, so let me start with you, Mr. Musa, especially as you and your members are going to be at the forefront, are going to be at the helm when it comes to the rollout of the reopening of our schools. I just want to find out from you, what is the general feeling when it comes to members of your group and having to resume at this point in time? Is it something you were waiting for? What is your reaction, immediate reaction?
Oh, thank you very much. And Happy New Year to yourself and to all the viewers. We thank God for giving us the opportunity to see 2021. Regarding the initial comment, there are four main things that are confronting as a people. There are four main things confronting us as a people. Number one, it has to do with the number of children who are 4 years old as of 2020. And if you take into consideration the population of Ghana, which is a little above 31 million, and a margin of error of 3%, we have at least about 651,000 children waiting to go to KG. And so there must be a movement for them to go. The second challenge confronting us as a people is that the incidence of child labor has gone up. If you take the Ghana Standard Living Survey that was done in 2014, we believe that we should have made some gains, but as a result of the COVID, we have forgotten some challenges because the children are not in school. If you ask them, they will tell you that's because schools are not in session. The third thing that is confronting us is the issue of teenage pregnancy. In fact, if you look at the World Vision International website now, it's telling us that one of the districts we have as many as 51 girls who are pregnant now. And so taking all these things into consideration, we know that, like I've already said, we are not in normal times. But whatever we can do as a people to get the schools to reopen, starting from KG up to the SHS level, as the president has said, it is something now we need to work towards. Also looking at that all the conditions and all the things that must be put in place for teachers to go to school must certainly be put in place. So that's my initial comment, depending upon what comes up later.
Right. So before I proceed from there, you raised a thorny issue, and the Africa Education Watch, for example, has been delving into that matter. It has to do with pregnant girls, as far as, our school system is concerned. And there has been that call, on the Ministry of Education to harmonize the free SHS admission system to allow school heads to readmit students, especially pregnant girls, after delivery. What is your quick take on that, this situation when it comes to our students in school who get pregnant or who fall pregnant? What is your take on the matter?
Yes, thank you very much. The only way we can stop pregnancy, or at least reduce it to the barest minimum, is to keep the girls in school. We need to keep the girls in school. And once the girls are in school, they will certainly focus on their books. That is the only way out. Look, the 51 girls that I spoke about, that is between March and May. Between March and May, 51 girls, and that is 9-fold increase. And so this is telling us that the more they stay in the house, the more these challenges that we'll have. But like I said, we need to put the necessary measures in place to get it done. So we need to do everything to make sure that we return to school and protect the future of these girls and young ones.
Now, to wrap up on this point, before I move to Mr. Adokwe, again, your teachers are going to be at the forefront. His Excellency has mentioned that there are going to be provisions made when it comes to equipment at the schools, hygiene equipment, and the rest. But what exactly are the requisites as far as NAT is concerned, your teachers are concerned? What are you looking forward to having as you approach this new cycle in the reopening of schools?
Now, when there are 4 levels to this. The first level is what the president has done. The second level is what the ministry will do. And the ministry is here to get these things done. The third level will be the agency to get the implementation going. And then the last level will be the operatives. That is the districts and the circuit levels, and particularly the enterprise level, the schools, to get it done. So once the president has spoken regarding the details of the whole thing, that will be done at the ministerial level by the minister and the ministry. And once that is done, it will get to the Ghana Education, get to the GES. And at that, when you get to the ministry and the GES levels, that is where the nitty-gritty, the details of it will have to be looked at. For example, the protection of the children, the contact hours, the COVID-19 protocols, and all other things that must be taken into consideration, the duty bearers, among other things. That is the level where all those things will be taken on board. And I have heard people who are complaining, raising issues about that, about the KG and all those things.
Right. Now, Mr. Adokwe, I know you're still with us as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Were you offering some wrap-up points? Because I thought you had landed. But if you haven't, please wrap up.
What I was saying is that I have already indicated that we have 4 levels. We have the presidency, and the president has spoken. The ministry will give the guidelines. The GES will take up the implementation level, being the agency. Then the operative will do the implementation. And once it gets to both at the ministry and the GES levels, the necessary inputs and all the guidelines will be developed there to help us see how this thing could be implemented in the best interest of the child, as indicated in the Children's Act, and also the best interest of teachers who will be at the forefront of getting this thing done.
Right. Mr. Adokwe, let me come to you here, the concerned teachers of Ghana. We know that in Europe, more and more countries are returning to a lockdown situation. In Japan, a state of emergency has been, contemplated. When you come here, pardon my playing on words, but what are your concerns as the concerned, teachers of Ghana with regard to the reopening of schools? What are the valid issues that you're looking at?
Thank you very much, and good morning to all your viewers. Onupa Mingabwe Musa Afi. And greetings to all teachers in Ghana. Now, definitely there are issues. We are not in normal times. The academic calendar has also changed. Definitely, you realize that we were in actually the second term when you come to the basic schools, when the lockdown came in and the children were barred from going to school. And they've been in the house for more than 9 months now. But actually, per the directives that have come, we know that it means everybody is going to be pushed automatically. So they are moving straight to the new class. So if somebody was supposed to be in class 2, then the person is moving to class 3. And at the end of the day, there is a gap that we've got to fill. And the most difficult aspect of it is that the children have been in the house for a long time. Some of them have become rusty. And as my brother have said, teenage pregnancy, truancy will be a thing that will surely increase. Some of the children wouldn't even feel like going to school again. Some of them, especially the KG, they'll be crying. They'll think that there's nothing like school again. And I think all these things are problems that teachers ought to work very hard to overcome. At the end of the day, we shouldn't also forget the pandemic. The way it started, everybody, we were all shaking in one way or the other. At the end of the day, there was some partial reopening of schools, and it serves as a point, something that we can step on and know the way forward. And I think these things should be an example to us so that we'll put the various structures in place and then ensure that we have a very free, safe environment for the children to learn. Some schools are already overcrowded. It is an issue. If there's going to be the normal social distancing, as we've said, it means all the children cannot be in the same classroom. Because if we are also going to admit new entrants, that is, some children are now 4 years old, they have to come to preschool. And it means we have to think about, is it going to be a shift system? Are they all going to be in the classroom crumbled, 60, 50 in the same classroom? We have to think about all these things, but I don't want to jump the gun. Definitely, the president has spoken. There will be stakeholder consultation. I know GES and Ghana Education Service will come in. We'll sit down and look at all these things. And are we even going to rely basically on the normal way of teaching and learning, or we are going to move into the realm of some sort of virtual digital literacy here and there? And the computers and laptops promise teachers, are they going to come in? So all these things must come in so that it will not be a normal school system where they come in, they sit from 7 to 3 or 4 o'clock before they go home. All these things must be considered. Are they going to to be spaced in the class. They're going to be social. All these things are things that we've got to sit down and talk about.
Now, talking about those considerations, and rightly so, and again, making mention of stakeholder engagement, my only concern here is, shouldn't that have happened before we even, addressed the nation talking about the reopening of schools and all of that? We're in January, and as early as the 18th and even the 9th, some of our students are going back to school. So this stakeholder, engagement that you speak of now, don't you feel it should have happened already?
Thank you very much. I think there have been previous stakeholder engagement when there was the partial reopening of schools for the final years to go and write the examination, and then the second years in both the GHS and the senior high schools also were asked to go to school. And all those things were being done so that it will serve as a way of a learning point, so that we see how we can manage the larger body. So I think it is in steps. The president has spoken. He is the president. We cannot blame him for that. But it is expected that the Ministry of Education and Ghana Education Service will thus come in. And based on what we've done previously for the final years, and then the second years now going to the third year, I think we can stand on that and build on that. And then I think it will be okay.
All right, let me also acknowledge that we have joining us Professor Alfred Yorson, public health physician and head of community health at the University of Ghana Medical School. Prof, I'll be getting to you shortly, but thank you very much for joining us. Prof, you would have to unmute. I think your Zoom feed is still muted, so please unmute for us so we can hear what you're saying beneath that beautiful smile.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. So just hold on there for us. Now, I would also like to come to Alhaj Yakub Abubakar, who is president of CHAS, on the same development. We're going back, and indeed we know that it's not a unique situation we have on our hands. Kenya, students are going back to school today, and in other parts of the world as well. But in our case, are we ready for this, especially from the standpoint of teaching and learning? Are we ready for this? Okay, so it's the connection with Alhaj Abubakar is still, we're still trying to patch through to him. So let me seize the opportunity then and go to Professor Yorson and, just find out from you for starters. We know that the variant of COVID-19 in our part of the world, in Ghana, hasn't mutated so rapidly like it has in other places. But is it safe for us? Let me just hit the nail on the head. Is it safe for us to be going back to school, to be reopening schools at this point in time? What is your take?
Yes, good morning to the viewers and listeners. Again, looking at the trajectory and the way the pandemic has evolved over time, I would say there will never be any expedient time to go back to school. So we ought to go to school at a point. Our children have been at home for over 9 months, and then the social and economic costs, it's huge, the implications. And therefore, at a point, as a nation, we should be bold and take the decision for the children to go to school. And as you rightly said, we are not alone in this. Other countries are trying to, in the face of difficult circumstances, we need to take some bold decisions, albeit with all the necessary precautions and support from major stakeholders. So that would be my initial view on this.
Now, from the health standpoint, we also know that our numbers have been rising. We're trying to contain them, but the numbers keep increasing. And, there are so many dynamics to consider. In yesterday's address, as delivered by, the president, mention was made of mapping schools with health facilities and the provision of, the required, equipment, if you like, to ensure that this time round we don't face some of the situations we faced initially. Do you feel that we have learned the lessons to ensure that, I mean, in the past there were places without, the equipment to be used, the guns, the temperature guns and all of that. Do you feel that we've got to the point where we have learned from those lessons and moving forward we can do what it takes to control the spread of the virus?
I'm sincerely hoping so, that we have had experiences with the SHS-3 and GHS-3 as well as the SHS-2s and the GHS-2s. And I'm sincerely hoping that we've learned some useful lessons and that some of the initial challenges we had will not persist. In fact, the worry is that we are opening universally on a much wider scale, and we certainly will anticipate some of these challenges. But the important thing is we should be able to be preemptive and be up and doing. So as soon as issues occurs, we deal with it, because on a smaller scale, you can manage it, but now we are doing it nationwide, universal, and therefore, as was said, schools have been mapped to health facilities, but as to how effectively this will work, we will hope that it does. And as soon as issues arise, as I said, we should be able to deal with it. And the bottom line, as we always keep saying, is to continue the safety protocols, the washing of hands, the wearing of masks, and the social distancing. In truth, it's going to be difficult. We shouldn't, if I may say, kid ourselves, because how do you expect kindergarten pupils to be able to effectively wear masks? Therefore, we should take other measures, making ventilation, opening windows, getting airy places, not letting them stay in the classroom for much longer, bringing them out from time to time, other measures as well as keeping them apart, social distancing. It's not going to be easy, but it is a fight we need to be ready to fight. Otherwise, we cannot move on, and our children will have to stay at home for as long as we don't know when. So we need to take some bold steps to do this. And I hope that we have learned useful lessons and we can scale it up to the universal scale.
Okay, so before I move to the other guests, sticking to the health, concerns that have been raised. We know that broadly, even at our airports, the protocols they keep changing, and now we have the 7-day mandatory, periods of seclusion and all of that, quarantine and all of that. But from listening to the president's address yesterday, with the protocols that he made mention of, and the sort of interactions, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, and all of that, where do you feel we really ought to pay attention to on the health front, especially as, children go back to school, students go back to school? Where do you feel from the health, perspective, we need to hammer, focus to prevent any problems moving forward?
One will be, it's a good thing to note about the airport and all the efforts being made to limit or reduce the importation of disease into the country. And all the effort being made is commendable, and we should continue to do that, especially with variant strains in different parts of the world, much closer to us. And that is very good. We need to do that and make sure that we don't bring in new infections into the country. Again, the provision of personal protective equipment is key. And therefore, the promise has been made, and we believe it will be made good, so that the schools will be supplied with the needed PPEs, and then teachers and pupils will be protected and be able to work in an environment that is relatively safer for the children to learn. So provision of PPEs is the second one that we need to be conscious about. And also the need for continued public education. Now that we are planning to reopen, there should be the increase in the risk communication strategies, targeting parents, targeting wards, guardians, targeting teachers, PTAs, and all stakeholders in education. it's key that we educate children right from the home to know what they ought to do, and then the teachers can complement it when they get to school. PTAs should be supportive of all activities of the schools as well, and all stakeholders, because we need everybody and everyone on board to maintain the safety environment that we require for learning to take place. The mapping of the school facilities to the health facilities is also key. We need to make sure that, touch wood, should something occur in a school, it can readily be dealt with. Those who need to be quarantined will be quarantined. Those who need to be tested, the facilities will be available to get them tested so that we can limit the spread of the virus among such youthful and population and young children. They per se may not suffer the severe consequences, but they act as a reservoir, they act as a transmission source, and that's where we should be careful about. They may, if they get infected from school, may bring it to their homes, parents, grandmothers, grandfathers who are more vulnerable, and that's where we need to pay particular attention to ensure that when, as parents, children come back from school as well, we ensure all the safety protocols at home as well, not only in school. Whilst we continue the public education and engagement, make sure that things are done right as expected everywhere and at every level.
Right. Thank you for staying with us, Prof. And don't you go yet. Let me come now to Mr. Musa, because another matter of concern has been the track system, single track, double track. A lot of, word has been put out there with regard to the foibles or challenges of the double track system. Here we are. Now we're being told that as far as SHS 1 and 3 are concerned, they'll be on the single track. SHS 2 will be on the double track. Are those any gains to be celebrated, and what does that bode for the future?
Yeah, thank you very much. Regarding the strategy to adopt at the SHS level, we have currently agreed that it has come up that the SHS ones, they will now have a single string, and the SHS 3 also have the same thing, but those are the SHS 2 now will do the double track, and that has to do with the issue of space. And aside that one, it also has to do with the issue of time and space for them to actually complete the content of what is required at the time. Because if you look at the time that they'll be going to school, if we do not put them together like that, it will be very difficult, if not impossible, for them to get enough time to cover the content. And that is why that has come up. And like I said earlier on, there are more detailed plans regarding this particular thing, even up to the KG level. But for the sake of time, we cannot, discuss all those things now. But I believe that when we meet at the ministerial level, and also with the Ghana Education Service, all these things will come up. For example, where we need to, at the basic level, where we need to run the shift system and all that, it will be done. And back again to the SHS, the SHS ones is to enable them cover the content that is required of them within the very good and reasonable time. And SHS 3 also is to enable them prepare for the exam. One of the key things that has informed this particular thing is that, if we could recall, we have already lost second and third terms of last academic year. Thank God we were able to, as for the second term of last year, we were able to cover it, but we lost the whole of third term and we lost the whole of first term last year. And once we have lost these two terms, we need to ensure that those in the first year now have enough time to cover that particular time, those two terms, and also those in the final year now, they're also going to write the exam, and they need more time to get it done. And if we could recall, those informed tools, when schools close down, they resume together with their counterpart in JHS2. So at least they have already done some work. So giving them the double track, we believe that we'll be able to manage it, taking into consideration the issue of the COVID. We must be careful as we go about all these things. So we think that it is in place as we proceed on this particular principles and rules of engagement.
Even in some of the views of our, viewers, I should say, our audience, who have been sharing some concerns in posing the next few questions to you. Now, this one, for example, comes through from Ablade Fiakumazongo Takrade, who talks about, getting kids back to school being a good thing, but the reopening, well, he would have wished that the reopening would have been pushed to the end of January. Is it too little too soon, or is the timing apt, like Professor Yawson would say, that we had to open up at some point in time? And as you answer that question, Mr. Musa, I would want you to address term lengths, for example, because now that comes into the picture. How long is the term going to be? Even at the tertiary level, we see some going to, back to school for only 6 weeks. What are the key issues to contemplate there?
Yes. When I started, I indicated that there are 4 levels to this. The president has spoken. We have the ministerial level where the guidelines will be developed or will be updated. Then we have the GS level. This particular time we have to do with the issue of the contact hours and the duration. And all those things will be determined. For example, when it came up, we are looking at where the children will do not more than 4 hours. So normally the children could have gone, they will go to school at 8 a.m. and close 2 p.m. But as things are now, if they go to school 8 a.m., we do not expect them to go beyond 12 noon. In the same way, the KG people, when they go to school, when should they start and when should they close? So, in developing the guidelines regarding the contact hours, the duration, and other related matters, in order to create a conducive environment for the teaching and learning to take place, all these things will be done to protect the teachers and to also protect the students. And like I indicated earlier on, all this should be in the best interest of the child, and will ensure that the right things are done when the guidelines are being developed, both at the ministerial and also at the GES level, so that when it comes to the implementation level at the enterprise levels, we will surely be on top of our game. But one of the things we want to add is that sometimes when it comes to the issue of the resources to be provided, that is where you see sometimes challenges and feet dragging and excuses. We have all agreed that we are not in normal times. And to the extent that we are not in normal times, whatever resources that will have to be deployed by the 18th of January to kickstart the new academic year, we want to plead that all the duty bearers should ensure that same is done to protect our children and to ensure that not a single soul will be lost when school reopens.
Okay, so a very quick one before I move to Mr. Adokwe, just because you made mention of that point, when you talk about foot dragging and all of that, is there example to share on that? I mean, which entity, which personalities are you speaking of when you talk about foot dragging? Which entity specifically are you looking at?
We are talking about the duty bearers. Duty bearers here, there are many. The district assemblies will be involved in these things. This is not everything that will be done at the center and by the ministry. Some of these things will be delegated to the assemblies and the local authorities. Okay, and so long as their children are involved and children at the local levels are involved, we need to ensure that we deploy all the necessary, the tools and materials that are needed. Look, we met recently, and when we met, one of the key things that came up was that we don't want a situation where everything will be controlled at the center. Take, for example, there are schools that have large populations, and we have agreed that, look, in areas like that, let us give certain amount of discretionary powers to the district directors and to the managers at that level for them to determine how the school should go. And so they can say, hey, based upon the enrollment here, let us do 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours noon. Why? Because of the environment and the conditions there. So we don't want to have one size fits all, or we have one arrangement for all schools. No. So depending upon the district where you are coming from and depending upon the challenges confronting each of the districts or the specific location where the school is, there should be, we want to create more rooms for local arrangement to be made, such that the situation and the demand of that particular area will be contained. And these are things that in fact, we have actually drawn attention to, and we have been assured that all these concerns will be taken. And thank God that this particular week, at least the top management of the Ghana Education Service will be meeting somewhere tomorrow, and all these things will come up, say.
Right. Mr. Adokwe, a very quick one here. Now, these are some concerns that have also been shared with us by some of our viewers. It has to do with the new curricula, especially at the basic level, and the availability of GES-approved books. What do you know about that you can share with us this morning? Have the necessary arrangements been made as far as that is concerned?
Thank you very much. I think at the basic school level, talking about preschool to class 6, the Common Core program took place more than a year ago. So I think the last academic year, there was the introduction of the new curriculum and the new system of education. So we've been taking them to, but it came without textbooks. But I think NACA made it known that the textbooks are now ready, although we've not been to school to verify whether it is really ready. But we believe that for the basic school level, that is from preschool to primary 6, it should be ready. But there's a problem. Those moving from class 6 to JHS 1 now, they also have to continue with the new curriculum. And I think there've been 1 or 2 hitches at the training program for the Common Core program that was being held, and it has been postponed. But we know it will resume, so that at the end of the day, that Common Core program can also be implemented at the junior high school and even the senior high school. So those who will be going to senior high school Form 1 and junior high school Form 1 will also start with that program. So we are hoping and believing that by the time we resume, hopefully 15th, 18th of January 2021, the books will be ready.
Now, talking about preparations, there also was that, stopgap measure when it comes to the provision of hot meals for students. Of course, this may not be something that you have, a lot of knowledge about, but is that something that you feel if it were continued, now that we are continuing, for example, with free water and the rest for lifeline customers, do you feel that is something that ought to be continued even as we battle COVID-19 to propel students to go back to school?
Definitely, if it is worth doing, then it could be done. Again, as a matter of fact, there is a problem. I have a personal problem about the way the school feeding program has been structured. Formally, only those at the primary school are being fed. Even that one, it never covered all the primary schools. JHS wasn't included. But fortunately or unfortunately, you go to the senior high school and everybody is fed, including day students, they are fed. To the neglect of the basic school, that is the JHS. But COVID-19 came in, the final years at the JHS level and even the second years who just ended somewhere in the middle of December last year, they were being fed. And I don't think it will be prudent that we put a stop to it. I think as we are going back to the table, I think all these things will be considered. If really what we've done is very prudent, and we think we've got to bring the larger body, that is everybody should come to school now, then I think that thing should also be considered. It will not be wrong for every child to be fed 1 hot meal a day from preschool to senior high school. Already it was being done to the neglect of the junior high schools. But now, some of them were included last year because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and I think it should continue that way.
Right. I would wrap with Professor Yosin, whom I believe is still on the line with us. And so looking at all the dynamics that we've considered up to this point in time, from the health perspective, from the educational perspective, from the perspective of ordinary Ghanaians and what we can do, what would be your sum-up thoughts for all of us, parents, students, and, more, in terms of moving forward, reopening our schools and all of that? What would be your final comments, Prof?
Okay, sir. I will say that we should continue each for all and all for each. We should continue to look out for each other and to support in every way that we can. Functions of parents, guardians, teachers, school authorities, and in fact, all duty bearers, as we have just spoken of. it is important. Challenges may arise, but as they do, we should be able to deal with them as we have done so far. Public education is key. We need to deal with anxieties of parents, anxieties of teachers. It's important that we communicate and we make sure that people are comfortable, and there is no other way. We need to get the children in school, and those whose responsibility it is to provide the PPEs ought to do that so that things can run smoothly while we continue with all the national effort to limit importation of disease, to trace cases, get them treated, isolated if we have to, and get the system running.
Well, I would like to say a very big thank you to all of you. Thomas Musa, General Secretary of NAT, Aikwe Awule Adokwe, Communications Director, Concerned Teachers Association of Ghana, and of course, Professor Alfred Yorson, who also joined the conversation, public health physician and head of community health, University of Ghana Medical School. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining the conversation, and Happy New Year to you. Now, I'll quickly take just a few of your messages before we move on and talk about the NDC parliamentary members' blues. Now, this one says, when are we, those in the secondary schools and tertiary institutions, also resuming school? Well, there are timelines that have been given. And as far as tertiary institutions are concerned, some are starting teaching on the 18th, the 9th, which is the official dates there. I saw a message earlier about... So I think I saw one with regard to whether the students, they'll be rolling over. So if the person was in class 2, is the person now starting class 3? Well, that is part of what we've heard. The application is what remains to be seen. Maybe this final message for now as we move on. And it says, good morning to you and your panelists. I think whatever it is, the children need to go to school now. Let's try the arrangement made for now. And that is King Gecko, who has come up with that message. So the show continues from here, but we're going to take a bit of a breather. When we come back, more right here. Do stay.
Well, thanks for still staying with us here on the AM show. We move from one important conversation to another, something that basically is unfolding, and I'm talking about those 20 minority members of this 7th Parliament who are said to be appearing before court today. I would engage Dr. Rashid Rahman, Executive Director, African Center for Parliamentary Affairs. He joins us via Zoom. Hello, good morning, Dr. Rahman. Happy New Year to you.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
Apologies, you've been holding for a while, but thank you so much for your time. Also joining us is a lawyer, Justice Abdullahi. Very good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us as well for this conversation. Hello, Mr. Justice Abdullahi.
Yeah, hello, good morning.
Good morning and a Happy New Year to you as well.
I believe you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Many returns. God bless you all.
Okay, great. So, gentlemen, we've got a report to put this conversation into proper perspective. I would like to play back if you don't mind. So just hang in there. Let's listen to the full report. We'll come back for a conversation. Here we go.
And so there are 20 MPs, like you pointed out, and Peter Otokono-Boamah making 21. The names there is Haruna Idrisu, who is the minority leader. There is Mohammed Mubarak Muntaka, who is currently the minority chief whip. There is Samuel George.
Okay, so I'm sorry, it's not a report, not quite a report that we have, but I'm sure that you are familiar with the fact that 20 members of parliament in the minority caucus have been charged with unlawful assembly following that march to the Electoral Commission to present a petition. This happened on December 22nd. In addition to the MPs, the National Democratic Congress Deputy General Secretary Peter Boamah Otokono has also been charged with the same offense. They are said to have failed to notify the police before their march. The statement of offense said they unlawfully assembled and conducted themselves in a manner likely to cause persons in the neighborhood reasonable fear where a breach of the peace is likely to be occasioned. And, you know, it's on the back of this that we have this conversation. Let me start with you, Dr. Rahman. Have you witnessed anything like this? And when I talk to you, I guess because of your familiarity with our parliaments and others on the continent, I like to start with a bit of history, if there is any. Has anything like that happened?
Well, yes, I think a lot of these have happened before, and I would want to say we've seen this in countries that don't pride themselves as democratic as we are, in terms of the response that the state has brought to bear on instances where members of parliament have taken to the streets to express certain concerns. So yes, this has happened. I've seen it happen before in many places, and often the response has been quite disproportionate. But I think those are countries that are nowhere near where we are in terms of our democratic credentials. And that is why, for me, it is a bit surprising to hear that these MPs are being charged. And maybe I'll get to my reasons for that later.
Okay, great. But are you disappointed that, first of all, they went on this march to present a petition at the time without notifying the police?
No, I'm not disappointed. You know, I know that I'm not a lawyer, and I know you know, members of parliament in particular who are the lawmakers of our land have to make sure that at all times, you know, they comply with the laws that they make. But Mamavi, we are witnessing, you know, times that are not normal, and I think that, you know, in the interest of you know, making sure that the tension, particularly in the weeks just following the declaration of the results, at the time that the members of parliament marched on the electoral commission's premises, I mean, would have thought that, given the situation that we found ourselves in as a country, perhaps maybe a different approach would have been used to look at this, to look at the match, particularly because, you know, you want to give space to people to vent out their, if you like, let me qualify it carefully, their frustrations or, I mean, any concerns that they have. And these are, even if unlawful, these are members of parliament, and I don't think that they were going to inflict any harm on the electoral commission and its officials.
Let me bring in our lawyer in here. Mr. Abdullah, first of all, what do you make of this development? Some persons have said, oh, the police has time to actually pursue this matter and get to the point where these minority members are due in court today. Hello, Justice Abdullah, you have to unmute for us so we can hear you.
Thank you. I think I was muted because of the way my kids were making noise in the background.
We don't mind. They will soon go back to school. 15th is just around the corner.
I pray very soon, God willing. Now, indeed, as I was saying, I am impressed with the swiftness with which the police have acted by putting together the necessary processes to get the members of parliament to court. I am impressed because we hardly see that happen in this country. I have made my position well known that political crimes at all levels, for whatever form or shape it takes, must be prosecuted because indeed, for me, it is the reason for a lot of the indiscipline and indeed the
unsolved crimes that we have in this country. I think it is thwarting our progress in a lot of ways, and so I'm indeed impressed that these steps are being taken, albeit unexpected, particularly to members of parliament. I have to be completely honest that I do not expect this to see its full trial. I mean, a trial to the end, and indeed for conviction to be secured. I do not hope. I do not think it would happen because I think we are all witnesses to how we handle matters in this country, and so clearly, I have no faith that this is going to see the full length of the issues involved. Having said that, and being impressed with the prosecution of this issue, I would be hesitant to say that indeed the selective nature of prosecution of political crimes in general, in particular with regards to this election, is, however, very unfortunate and not in accordance with dictates of the rule of law. I understand that indeed the police would have their own discretion as to what crimes to prosecute and what not to. But we've witnessed a lot of crimes run up to this election, or at least from the 7th, in fact, right from the days Hawa Yakubu pulled a gun and shot into the air when the registration exercise was being conducted by the Electoral Commission. We've seen her walking around. An attempt to prosecute her got the investigator transferred from his region to somewhere else that he would not even have the opportunity to oversee the matter. And I understand that some...
Unfortunately, we seem to be losing Justice Abdullahi there.
Itself.
Okay, so can you just go back just a little bit, because you froze and we couldn't hear what you said.
My apologies. What I was saying was that I would want to see this in the light of combating political crimes in general. And to that extent, the selective nature of this is what I am not happy with, because particularly when we all know of the Hawa Yakubu incident, sorry, is it Hawa Kumsen? Hawa Kumsen, who was alleged to have shot into the air during the days of the Electoral Commission registration exercise.
Okay, so
indeed,
not to cut you, but I take it that you think that indeed these minority MPs breach the law.
I would not be able to say with certainty, but I can say from the perspective of the police that they have breached the law. But I am not. I'm only a lawyer, and so I cannot confirm. It is only a judge who can indeed make that pronouncement that they have indeed breached the law.
Okay, so essentially, I guess what I'm asking is,
then sentence them.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking is, what they embarked on, does that constitute unlawful assembly in your view? I know lawyers have different perspective. Yours could be different from another lawyer's.
From the bare facts of it, it does appear to be so if the police was not notified.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm hesitant to make a firm pronouncement is because these persons have been put in court and their rights is at stake.
Okay.
My pronouncement or otherwise could affect the possible outcome of the case.
I totally respect that.
Opinion.
I respect that.
So that is why I'm hesitant to put it that way.
Great.
However, that is what the police is saying. And
all right.
I'm sure if they have any defense, they will be able to indicate that in court.
Okay.
But clearly, if you do embark on a demonstration or anything close to that without notifying the police, per the Public Order Act, that is a crime. And that is an offense that you probably may have to answer to.
All right. There's another angle. There's another, just hold it there for me. There's another angle to this that I'll come to you on a bit later on. But I want us to engage parliamentary correspondent Joseph Opoku-Gakpo. He's got some interesting perspective to this. Joseph, a happy new year to you. I think this is our first conversation on Parliament. First of all, remind us again, we know Haruna Idrisu has been mentioned so many times, but who are the other members? Joseph, you've got to unmute your microphone, okay? Go ahead.
I thought you left this behavior in 2020. Looks like we brought it into 2021.
No, you did.
But good morning to you and happy new year, Mama.
Many happy returns.
So Haruna Idrisu, the minority leader, and 19 other minority MPs, including the Chief Whip, Muntaka Mubarak, James Aveji, the deputy minority leader, James Agalga, the ranking on the Defense and Interior Committee, Ras Mubarak, and a number of them. Some of the names on the list are interesting because Dr. Zaneto Rawlings is one of the 20. I don't recall spotting Dr. Zaneto Rawlings there on the day that the entire incident unfolded, as well as a number of others, including the Mbele MP, Kofi Boy, and others. And additionally, Peter Boama Otukuno, who is the Deputy General Secretary of the NDC, is the 21st person who's been added onto the minority MPs, and these charges have been thrown up against them.
And Joseph, there are some of the MPs who say they're going to trigger some form of immunity that they have because they're parliamentarians?
So if you read Article 117 of the Constitution, and I'm not a lawyer, so maybe I may wrongly interpret it, but of course it's English, so I could just read it so we all make our judgments of it. Article 117 is categorical that civil or criminal processes coming from any court or place out of Parliament shall not be served on or executed in relation to the Speaker or a member or the Clerk of Parliament while he is on his way to, attending at, or returning from any proceedings of Parliament. So that covering is there that when it comes to an MP, a Speaker, or a Clerk of Parliament, when they are going to Parliament, attending Parliament, or returning from Parliament, you can't serve on them any court summons, and you can't execute any criminal processes in relation to whatever they may or may not have done. So we've seen precedents where, for example, you recall just about a week ago, Inusa Fuseni was to be invited by the police CID for interrogation when he said John Mahama, the NDC flag bearer, should declare himself president-elect and form his own government. What the police CID did was to write to the Speaker, and the Speaker then wrote back granting leave that they can go ahead and interrogate him, and went ahead to write to Mr. Inusa Fuseni that he should show up at the police headquarters. Well, that was a police investigation. This case had to do with a court summons and all. But even when you read the provisions in the Constitution, the reference is to even court summons. So this is the article that the minority MPs are invoking and insisting that there is parliamentary sitting today at 10 a.m. They've not seen a situation of any request going to the Speaker to release them to the court or, for that matter, to the police for the prosecution. So they will not show up in Parliament. They will not show up in court today at 10 a.m. to respond to the charge.
Very interesting. Let me ask Dr. Rashid Rahman what you make of this development.
Well, Mamavi, honestly, I think that what our security and law enforcement agencies and for that matter, their superiors are doing in this matter is not smart. We are dealing with, what is going to be a very difficult parliament where, however you look at it, we need the majority. If there is one, or maybe let me withdraw that. We need the NDC and the MPP to work together. As the lawyer said, we have seen so many crimes, political crimes in this country. Related to these elections that we've had. What happened to those who killed in Techiman? What happened to the honorable member who fired the shot? So please, let's look at the mood of the nation, because even lawyers say that there is what is called, if I'm defining it rightly, jurisprudence. You have to apply the law, but sometimes some common sense is needed. And I think that this is a situation where you have Haruna Idrisu, you have Muntaka, you have Abeji, you have all the key people that will be needed to make the next parliament function. honestly, it's not smart. I think that our security agencies should, carefully reconsider this.
And let me put this to you, Justice Abdullahi. I haven't heard of the perspective of somebody who is familiar with how parliaments operate, talking about bringing common sense to bear, even though we agree that this falls under our crimes, and what he thinks the action should have been. What do you make of that? I mean, you're talking about how impressed you are with how speedily this case is going.
Unfortunately, the police do not operate with political undertones in their bid to achieve justice.
Is that a matter of fact?
Well, that is how it's supposed to be. The fact that there are political influences over the actions of the police does not mean that that's what it ought to be. Unfortunately, it is we as Ghanaians, indeed, our political actors have been the one unduly influencing the police to act in their interest. Otherwise, the police ought to be independent in their prosecution of matters. Indeed, the police traditionally do not even prosecute matters. It's the Attorney General that ought to be prosecuting these matters. And so to that extent, I would say that once the police have some small amount of room to operate and prosecute their issues, until a political authority is brought to bear, I do not think you can fault the police in this manner. Matters I do not even trust much of what our police services do because of their own conduct or misconduct, if you want to put it so. And so really, to that extent, I would agree in a way with my senior colleague that conducting this in a manner that would not anger the other side would be a smart way of achieving a more cohesive parliamentary democracy. But that is not also the way to go when you are fighting crime. You ought to show that indeed crime is irrespective of political affiliations and that when committed, it ought to be prosecuted. And Mamavi, as I...
Hello, Mr. Abdullahi. Hello, Justice Abdullahi. Okay, I think we've just lost you again briefly, but if you can hear me, I wanted you to touch on the area of what if they don't show up in courts? What happens?
My apologies, my line dropped. I don't know whether...
No, we didn't get you at all. The next leg. So I was asking the question of what happens if these MPs don't show up in courts?
If the police haven't sought for the certificate of the speaker, then the MPs would be within their right not to show up. And what usually would happen is that the prosecutor would inform the court of this event, and the court may either make an order directing the prosecution team to obtain a certificate from the Speaker of Parliament, or will make an appropriate order informing the Speaker about the development, and the Speaker may determine whether or not to release these persons, to release a certificate about these personalities, and then make them available for trial. But Mamadi, if you hear me, I have always had an issue with this particular aspect of the Constitution protecting MPs. I do not think, the 21st century, we still need that immunity clause protecting the members of Parliament, particularly when it has to do with civil prosecution. And indeed, in fact, for criminal prosecution in general, I do not think the immunity clause for the MPs are desirable today. These were made at a time that MPs were being harassed by the state. And so they needed this kind of protection in order to ensure that the innocence and indeed the rights of ordinary citizens like you and I are protected. Today, these things do not happen, particularly with Ghana, and I'm sure most other developed countries. These events do not happen. We do not have the state unduly chasing the other side of the political divide for things that are more or less that have not been done, or that we probably may see it as chasing them simply for other objectives rather than the pursuit of justice.
Okay.
And so having this part of the immunity clause still protecting the minority in our laws, I do not think is good for the running of our democracy. Okay. I think we should have a review. We should have a review session one day to amend that aspect of the Constitution, because our MPs are not different from us. They are simply our representatives, and they are not there for their personal interest. If they commit a crime or if they fall foul of the law, they should be made to face the law in accordance with any other person, just like any other person does. Indeed, the same can be said of the president as well. Elsewhere, a president, when he commits a crime, gets prosecuted for the crimes that he commits. We still have an anachronistic law that seeks to protect a president as if the president is a superhuman, who cannot fault, or who even when fault should be protected from all forms of prosecution. And then there's a small window of opportunity when he leaves office. I do not think that is still a very good part of our laws. We have to have a conversation about these immunity clauses for our MPs and indeed for our president, and then, if possible, get them amended completely. They ought to know that laws operate, and they must act in accordance with the law. Otherwise, we will still have the perpetuation of political crimes in this country.
Okay, just about 30 seconds. Under what circumstances will the court warrant be issued for the arrest of these MPs if they fail to show up in courts?
If it turns out that indeed the Speaker's certificate was sought for and was obtained, and the MPs, possibly out of ignorance, did not know, and so as a result did not show up, then a warrant of arrest could be issued for their arrest, and that would be a very bad precedent for them. I do not think that is what they would want to experience, because to be arrested on your blind side, and when they are arrested until the next court sitting, they can never be released by anybody, for that matter. And so I think that embarrassment and the show of force and power is not something that they desire at this moment. So I would strongly urge them to cooperate. They can go to court and make this known that indeed the Speaker has not issued a certificate for their presence in court. And so once that is clear, they'll go back and the prosecution will be ordered to do the most appropriate things. And that way, we would have a very smooth running, smooth prosecution going on.
All right. Joseph Opoku-Gakpo, are you able to tell if the Speaker has released these MPs to go to courts?
From the indication we get, these documents were dropped in the pigeonholes of the members of Parliament without the indication that the Speaker had actually been informed and the processes have been cleared up at the level of the Speaker. That's the indication that we're getting is the case, which is how come the minority MPs are insisting that they are not going. But the hint we're getting is that even if they don't show up, they may send up they may send through a legal representative to go explain things to the courts about how come they are unable to show up. But Mama V, if you have 30 seconds, the concern that lawyer has about the immunity that's being given to MPs, just to be clear, the immunity is not that they can't be prosecuted. When I read Article 117 and 118 of the Constitution, I get the sense that the spirit of what those who drafted the Constitution was driving at is that even if you have to prosecute them and all, don't do it in a way that affects their ability to represent their people in the House, which is how come all of those rooms are provided and it says seek the Speaker's leave and all. So, and if we're having this conversation before December 6th, I would have agreed with lawyer that these immunities are not necessary and this seek the Speaker's leave before you prosecute them or invite them are not necessary. But after what we saw on December 7th, can you imagine a situation where we're going into the crucial vote of who becomes Speaker on the dawn of 6th January, and because there's a court process on one MP or the other, there's an arrest warrant, it's been issued and the guy has been jailed, and 20 MPs don't have the opportunity to decide who the next Speaker will be, which then shifts the balance of power to the extent that those on the other side are electing the MP, when actually those on, the other side rather should be electing. That would obviously be injurious for our democracy. And I get the sense it's for things like this that protection was actually provided. The police should be doing the right thing rather than creating a situation where there's a lot of confusion when it comes to some of these things.
So, Dr. Rashid, Rahman, I guess this is one of the reasons, this is what you were trying to avoid by the statement that you earlier made. at this point in time, we actually do not need this because we need the two sides to be working together. If you were to, put a word through, what would you say the Speaker should do? Should he grant leave for these MPs to face justice, if you like?
No, I would say, I would advise the Right Honourable Speaker not to grant leave for these MPs to go and face justice. Look, Mama B, let us not set very bad precedents in this country. Let us not look at this as the only political crime that we've ever seen. And let me also join your parliamentary correspondent in responding to our learned colleague here. That look, given all the setbacks that we see in terms of democracy on our continent, I think this is even the time when we need these immunity provisions to be reinforced, because like your colleague said, some brutal majority group can invoke maybe a law or where MPs don't have any protection, such as this one, to deny MPs from going to Parliament to go and do their work. And the immunity simply says, it should not, an MP should not be prevented from going to perform his or her duties. And also, let's be clear that I think they are not, protected from any criminal acts. So, just to say, I think these provisions are very much needed, particularly at this time in our country, and also given what we see in most developing countries, where democracy is facing a lot of setback.
All right. Dr. Rashid, Rahman, we'll leave it here. Thank you so much for your time on the show with your perspective.
If I may address this.
Yes, I will come to you. I will certainly come to you. So please go ahead then. I just wanted to send Dr. Rahman off.
Very well. So this is it. See, the mistake we make in making these laws, such special events like this, at the time we were drafting the 1992 Constitution, the framers also had these similar concerns.
Okay, whilst we are frozen with his feed, Joseph Opoku-Gapo, Parliament is back 10 a.m., so we'll see how this plays out. We'll see whether or not the MPs stay away from this court session, right?
Yes, we all wait to see. The House is supposed to deal with a number of items, including approving their new standing order. They are supposed to deal with the ex-gratia package for the executive arm of government. We understand there are a number of loan agreements that they need to get done between now. Actually today, because the president will be delivering the State of the Nation address tomorrow, and then on Wednesday, it will just be the final sitting. So it's a very crucial day in Parliament, if you ask me. And worst case scenario, they should be allowed to deal with today's business, and any prosecution or anything else should be pushed to a different day.
Okay. All right, Joseph, we will wait for that live updates from Parliament, even as we get the updates also from the court. Justice Abdullahi, let me give you the last say because you froze on us again. So hopefully this won't happen. Let's hear you.
I'm sorry. So my point is that when you rely on specific events to make laws protecting certain classes of persons, you always be confronted with the unfortunate incident of having to look back and regret. And that is the story of the 1992 Constitution. It was made essentially to protect certain classes of persons, individuals. And today we are all witnesses to in fact, as of 2012, actually 2008, we are all witnesses to almost a complete overhaul of the entire Constitution. Why? Because we all realize that at the time we made the Constitution, they were made for events and for personalities. And if people are arguing, indeed, Dr. Dramani and your colleagues are arguing, that's simply on the basis of this event of the 2020 election, certain laws should be protected or be reinforced. Then you'll be confronted with yet another problem when you realize that these are not going forward, near to the benefit of the entire country. There are always means of protecting MPs, but they do not necessarily need immunity clauses. And as I said, I link this also with the president. The immunity with the president is the same thing. Our presidents keep committing crimes. They keep getting away with it. The same thing happens to these persons, even though, yes, indeed, there's a room for the MP, for instance, to still get prosecuted. My position is that you do not bring an anachronistic law to protect a person into 21st century Ghana. There is always a better way of protecting that person. The law is available for all of us. Indeed, the courts are available for all of us to advance our rights and indeed protect and assert our constitutional rights. Now, that is so because it is believed that in going about your business in a right way, your rights cannot be abused, at least not to the detriment to the country as a whole.
All right.
And so we can always have a means of protecting MPs without necessarily having to give them this kind of immunity.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
Very interesting argument, but thank you so much for your time. Dr. Rahman, I see you're still with us. It will be interesting if this new standing orders, what Joseph was just telling us about, if this is passed, because some have argued that what Parliament is dealing with now really should have been scrapped a long time ago. So hopefully if that happens, we should have another great conversation soon.
Yes, I hope, given what we are witnessing, I think that there is a lot in the standing orders that will need to change. And I hope this is an opportunity for them. But for instance, the standing orders talk about minority and majority caucuses. Now we are facing a situation where we don't have a majority, we don't have a minority caucus. I mean, I've seen this happen in a country where all of a sudden they woke up one day and then there was a new parliament and then there were several different parties in the parliament. And then the smaller party said, look, these standing orders are not made for us because they were made at a time when, the framers, were not thinking ahead. They were just thinking that parliament was going to remain the way it's been, over the years. And I think if they will be minded, I think that this will be an opportunity to try and look at the situation they are facing right now.
Okay.
And to think ahead. And also, Mama B, let me just add this, that this is a conversation I've had with the majority leader many times before, that, let's look at a situation where it is not only the majority party that takes the leadership of all the committees in parliament. In some parliaments, they try to find a way of sharing power and dividing some of these responsibilities. I think this is at our doorstep right now, given the situation that our country finds itself in.
Very interesting perspective you share there. Dr. Rashid Rahman, we'll leave it here. Hopefully we'll get to have another conversation tomorrow on what happens in Parliament today. He's the Executive Director of ASEPA. We had also in this conversation a private legal practitioner, Justice Abdullah, and of course our court correspondent, Joseph Opoko Gakpo. So very interesting thing happening in our country today. Be sure that we'll give you all the updates. Right now, though, I have to make way for show business.